The latest CBS News Battleground Tracker survey gives us a sense of who's winning the Democratic primary contest, how the president fares, but it also explores some of the fallout from the president's tweets last week about 4 freshman members of Congress. The so-called squad includes members from New York, Michigan, Minnesota, and where's it?
New York, Michigan, Minnesota, and Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, that's right. I'm like Rick Perry, I can't remember these things.
But there's 4, not 3.
And actually, my inability to remember who they are and where they're from speaks to something you found in the poll.
Yeah.
Which is that what? Republicans know more about the squad than their fellow Democrats knew about them, right?
They are better known among Republicans, and we should add, widely disliked among Republicans. So you can start to see the political wheels turning here from the White House, maybe thinking that this is a group that the Republican base already dislikes and already knows. But look, context. Like most members of Congress, Americans overall are not as familiar with them. They're not even as familiar with Nancy Pelosi,
right,
with Chuck Schumer, with Mitch McConnell. Yes, in D.C. here, everybody knows who they are. But outside of the president, these are folks who are not always household names to everybody. And that's worth reminding folks as well.
Or the phenomenon that they don't like Congress, but they like their member of Congress.
Often like their member or like their member's party, even
right,
more specifically in this environment.
Now, again, these 4 women from Massachusetts, New York, Michigan, and Minnesota, all of them minorities, all of them freshmen, have been the subject of intense conversation and scrutiny on Fox News, on conservative talk radio, on conservative blogs. They themselves frequently tweet about the fact that Republicans seem to be so obsessed with them. And again, I find this to be the most fascinating data point in the whole thing. This proves it, that Republicans are much more familiar with them than Democrats. I was thinking to myself, if you go back to 2011 when the Tea Party finally got some sense of control in this town, you ask Democrats who Mark Meadows or Jim Jordan was, they wouldn't have been able to tell you who they were.
No.
It's something about these women and the way they've been, in essence, exploited for political purposes by Republicans and by the president that might speak to this.
And I think it also speaks to the fact that today, sometimes one part of the party, often a member or two, who get a lot of attention on the cable shows or in the media, can define a party as well. So we also asked people who voted for Democrats in 2018, has the party been representing your interest? Has it been too conservative, too liberal for your taste? Democrats on the whole are happy with their party in Congress. But you do get a sense, I think, you talk to people in D.C. thinking, does the further left or the progressive wing of the Democratic Party come to define the entirety of the Democratic representation in Congress in the same way, going back to 2011, that the Tea Party and the folks on the further right were often seen to define the Republican caucus overall. And that's a function of attention sometimes.
Did you get a sense of how independents feel Democrats are doing running Congress?
Independents are okay. Independents are mixed. And part of the reason for that is there really aren't that many independents anymore.
Left anymore, right?
Yeah, the independents are very much either taking a side or leaning towards a side already, even though they call themselves independent.
The other perhaps troubling data point in all this is the stark divide between Democrats and Republicans responding to what the president tweeted. Republicans saying, not that big a deal, not racist. Democrats saying, yes, it is. But also that either party, by a partisan, is seen as sort of working against America or working to divide America. The idea that Republicans perhaps are more concerned about white Americans than Americans overall, I think was one data point you found.
Yeah, it really puts into context what we might be headed towards in 2020. Americans feeling that, whichever side they're on, that the parties reflect in their messaging what it means to be American in different ways. And that's a stark contrast. That's a stark divide. And you also see, when you ask Democrats, who do Republicans favor? Democrats who say Republicans take a side think Republicans favor the interests of white voters over minorities, and Republicans think the opposite.
Right.
It's important to note. They think when Democrats take a side, they take a side of minority interests over white voters. So you start to see that divide really in stark terms, along with the typical partisan splits that you see on the president's tweets, partisan splits. Republicans saying, we in the media have made too much out of it. Democrats saying, no, it's un-American. Feeling that it's racist. Republicans saying, no, it is not racist. It's pro-American. But it's that divide that's underneath it all that seems like it's part of the overall context.
So several days removed from this, as controversial as it was for the president to say what he said, he and his political team might look at these numbers and say, see, this is why we did it. It gins up our base, it keeps our people happy, it drives those divisions, which ultimately help him, it appears right now, at least from a strategic standpoint. And yet it reinforces that this country is awfully divided right now.
The country is often divided, and I think it speaks to what you think or they think 2020 is going to be about, in the sense of, is it most important right now to activate the base, to signal to the base that you're with them, or is it going to be most important to try to persuade? For whatever the sense of, however many voters there are in the middle, and there aren't many, right, to try and move them, that's a sense that which kind of campaign you think it's going to be. 2018, the midterms, showed that there were enough people to move the needle, but 2020 could be entirely different.
And that's the existential debate Democrats are having is, do you go for your base? Do you try to broaden it? Do you have this fight back in the Midwestern states where the president won? Do you expand the map to Arizona and Georgia and Texas and try to make a play for different areas of the country, different kinds of people? We'll see.
That's another segment, and a good one. But we'll have to save that one, the map.
Save that for next time.
Next time, the map.
You can review all this data for yourself at cbsnews.com. I'm Ed O'Keefe, along with Anthony Salvanto, our Director of Elections and Surveys. Thanks for watching.